I'd like to welcome Andrew Bowyer back for his second presentation of the weekend. Andrew qualified in 2001, and after travelling and ensuring abroad, he started his business in Devon. In 2006, he was working for the British Equestrian, covering para dressage, the para dressage squad. In 2016, he was Team GB for dressage and show jumping. He's covered 2 World Games, Tokyo and Paris Olympics, and 4 European Games. Last year, he passed his fellowship, and we're delighted to have you on stage today.
Thank you very much, Dan. And I'd just like to say again, thank you very much to Dan and the BFBA for putting this weekend on. It's been a fantastic weekend, and we've learnt loads, and everyone here has been great supporting all the lectures, so thank you. I've got a really nice, easy subject to talk to you about on a Sunday lunchtime, nice, easy listening on sidebone. And so over the years, I've had to deal with quite a lot of sport horses with sidebone and lameness and performance issues, and it always just bugs me a little bit when horses pass the vet with a fully developed sidebone. They can pass a 5-stage vetting, and then when you chat to vets and owners, they say, well, it might not necessarily be a problem. And they're absolutely right, it might not necessarily be a problem. But as I've researched this subject and got into it a bit more and understood the anatomy of the ungular cartilages and all the tissue that surrounds it, you can see why later on in their career they might have problems, and it's not all about the sidebone. So I'm just going to run through what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to run through a definition of what sidebone actually is. I'm going to look at how we diagnose sidebone and recognize it and causes. I've done quite a lot of work with my anatomy and function. I've been enjoying dissecting legs over the last year or so and trying to learn a bit more of that and create some better slides, not only so I can explain things better, but also so I can understand it a bit better. Performance inhibitors, so why sidebone might be a problem and what you might want to look for, and my farriery approach to it. So what is sidebone? Well, sidebone is basically just an osteogeneous process to the lateral cartilages or the ungular cartilages. And it's when that hyaline cartilage model is replaced by either porous or cortical bone. It's a lovely pathology. It's one of the first ones we learn at college, and I really love the simplicity of it. But ossification is when a cartilaginous model just turns to bone. It doesn't necessarily grow, and there is a calcification process to it as well, because it can grow as well. You see them sticking out through the hairline as well. And that's not normal for that cartilage. It's not just an ossification process, and it's thought to be related to high frequency vibrations that are dissipated through that foot. So diagnosis, how do we know that a horse has got sidebone? Well, quite often they're x-raying it for something else, nothing to do with the sidebone, and it's a surprise. And they can vary in size and width as well, and they can ossify from different sites. They don't just start to ossify from a distal site. They can start at the top and meet in the middle, and quite often those sites where they meet up are misinterpreted as fractures. But x-rays won't really tell you if the horse is lame, just that it's got it. Now we've got really good diagnostic techniques like MRI. We can tell if we've got inflammation around the sidebone and what other structures might be involved in lameness. And that will tell us if we've got inflammation, and it's better at telling us if we've got fractures as well. And it's a wonderful pathology because we can diagnose it. Okay, if we pick up a foot, we can feel if it's got a fully developed sidebone sticking out through the hairline, or quite often we can see a change in the medial lateral balance of that foot because of its anatomical location to the coronary band. If we get ossification there, it can push on that coronary band, and then we get a permanent change in that foot shape, and it's not a flare that we can necessarily just dress off because it changes shape from the coronary band. And a digital palmar nerve block as well can block out inflammation in the sidebone, but what that does do is it just blocks out everything else in the foot. It's not an accurate way of diagnosing problems with sidebone, but it does tell us that an area, but really they need to go for an MRI. Now, something that's really helped me over the past few years is understanding different grades of side bone, okay? And there's a couple of classification grade listings out there. There's an older one here, which has got 5 different grades, but it gets a little bit complicated around the coffin joint. And there's a more up-to-date grading system by Henderstrom and Wattle, which is just a 3-grade, 0 to 3 grade system. And I wish vets would use this in vettings as well, and it would start to benchmark horses as well to see if that side bone gets worse as that horse gets older or it goes through its career. But it's pretty simple, a 0 classification. It has got an element of side bone, as I will explain in my anatomy of the ungular cartilage, but that would be considered ossification of insignificance. Then grade 1 will be up to the proximal axial aspect of the dip joint, where we're starting to get around the margins of the joint, and also we've got condrungular ligaments that attach from the end of the navicular bone that attach to the cartilage as well. And then 2 and 3 is when we get higher, and then that can start impinging on coronary structures as well, and also the navicular suspensory, which I'll explain later. So causes, so what causes side bone? Well, it's probably one of those pathologies that's not fully understood. But if you look in all literature and textbooks, it's to do with vibration and the dissipation of forces. And the thing that really confuses me now is we get all these warm bloods that come over from Europe as 3 and 4 year olds, and they've been lightly backed. They're kept in big stores as well. They've got no concussive forces to their feet, and we get these big side bones in them from a very young age. And I think that could be to do with the hemodynamic system. I'll explain in the anatomy, but the cartilages are ramified by a microcirculatory system as well. So you might get circulatory congestion, and that could spark off calcification. But also the anatomy and foot balance of a foot. If we've got a horse which is really toe in or toe out, but more toe in is more common with a unilateral side bone, we've got adverse forces and concussion going through that limb. The route of dissipation of energy doesn't go straight up and equally out through both cartilages. It just chucks it out through one. And it would probably start to vibrate and start that ossification process. There's definitely a hereditary component to it, and a bit like navicular. In Europe, their stud books are now starting to grade classifications of side bone, and then if they've got a fully developed side bone and there's a genetic, like if there's a genetic pool all the way down the line, they're not using those mares for breeding. But if you look in literature as well, it says it's for closely related to cold-blooded breeds and native breeds. And years ago, we would have had lots of working horses and cobs and heavy horses doing all the work, and it would have been really common then. But why is it so common in warm bloods? Well, warm bloods are very closely connected to cold-blooded breeds. So a lot of them, the Gelderland or the Groningen, they have genetic pools of that in the warm blood strain, okay? And they are full cold-blooded horses. They're like agricultural horses. Injury or direct trauma to the area. So if a horse strikes into itself, we've got a racehorse that we shoe, went very lame after a race, struck into itself. Now it's got a socking great side bone there because it's just started off that ossification process and a quitter. So if we get a really bad infection in a foot as well, then that can start off that ossification process as the cartilage will become infected. Now, as I said, I've been doing quite a lot of dissections and learning a bit more about anatomy. And this horse, this limb came from a 5-year-old, and it had no ossification whatsoever. And it was the perfect one to just look at the anatomy of the cartilage. Now you can see here that the cartilage extends proximal to the coronary bone, and at the hairline you've got about 1/3 proximal to that. And if you take that away, and you've got your laminal and your laminal corium, and your papillae and your coronary corium, and you take that coronary cushion out, it's probably about half that extends above there. Now, at the back of the foot, we've got an attachment area for our laminae. Now, from there back, that laminae is completely attached to the cartilage, and it's completely malleable. So if you ever get the chance to do a dissection and you cut that frog's stay out and you scoop all that digital cushion out with a hoof knife, you can flex the back of that foot on a healthy foot. Okay, and then we can really see how when we get in thoroughbreds, so we don't get hot-blooded horses, which we don't really get much ossification, is we get lots of wear patterns in the back of our shoes. And that's because from their back, it's all cartilage. Okay, so it's really, really flexible. And that's designed like that to dissipate forces during loading and compression. We've got a lot of blood vessels that run through our cartilage as well. You can see here at this distal palmar aspect, we've got some big blood vessels there. And when you cut through it, it looks a little bit like a funky cheese. You've got loads and loads of holes ramifying through it. And here you can see that the pedal bone slots in there, and you can see how big the cartilage is. And I've dissected quite a few of these now. And then when you look in textbooks, we take that as an image of what a cartilage is. And a lot of the older textbooks are actually incorrect because they have the cartilage sat right on top of the pedal bone, but it doesn't. It actually extends down the palmar asset and forms the back of the foot. Now we've got an awful lot of ligament attachment areas around the ungular cartilage. The navicular suspensory runs very close anatomically and up behind that cartilage and inserts into the distal and medial aspect of P1. And then we've got 3 quadrangular ligaments. We've got our proximal, our middle, and our distal. And they hold that in place. So it's a bit like guy ropes. It helps to stretch it out. So under those compressional forces, it doesn't collapse on itself. It sort of keeps it on in place. And then it's attached to our pedal bone through these really deep grooves. So you can see these really deep grooves that run along here. We can see where our ungular cartilage is actually thickest in line with our coffin joint, but it extends all the way round to the extensor process. And I'm amazed at how big these cartilage are. They're really, really massive. And I can't find an awful lot of literature on how they are connected to P3, but it's by some sort of interosseous attachment. So that could also spark off side bone a bit like a splint. So if we get a little bit of tearing in that ligament, that could spark off the side bone from there. Now, from a palmar aspect, we can see our navicular suspensory here. And Sue Dyson found a significant correlation between ossified side bones that are in a 2 and a 3 zone. And they are thought to abrade that navicular suspensory ligament under loading, and you can see how closely it runs here. So I've soaped this foot without trying to take any of the cartilage away, and these would extend up a little bit more, and they sit right next to that ligament, so you can see how that might influence it. You've also got our sesamoidian ligaments, so you can see how the cartilages flex under load, but when they stop flexing, that could influence the navicular bone and the coffin joint. And then we've got our cruciate ligaments involved as well. So you can see how many anatomical structures are involved in the ungular ligaments. It's not just 2 plates of cartilage that sit on top of P3. Now, this one here, this video, just really kind of reiterates how far forward those cartilage to go. And if you dissect it, you have to actually pull P2 out. When you pop it back in, it kind of clicks back in. And they go round the front of P2, holding it in place. And if we get ossification that extends dorsally, that can start impinging on the joint. Now, we've got a couple of transverse sections here. So here we can see the anatomy of the cartilage in relation to other structures around it. So we've got our digital cushion that just sits in the middle with our frog stay. And then we've got our cartilages that extend up and form the shape of that coronary band. They sit completely parallel to it. There's no space at all. Okay, and we can see how many blood vessels are around these cartilages, and we can see some coming through here as well, and there's lots of microscopic ones. If you take everything off the cartilage, it looks a little bit like pigskin. There's lots of little invaginations and pinpricks through, and Bowyer found that there's a microcirculatory system that supplies the cartilages. But we can see how when they ossify, we're going to get restriction in heart hemodynamic system, how it's not going to work as well as it should do. Now, this is my favorite section, okay? And when I read Sue Dyson's paper, I thought I had to really think about where the navicular suspensory is. And you can see how big it is here. So this is the insertion point here into the navicular bone. It's just above there. And the navicular suspensory bifurcates. It's a really big ligament, but you can see that how close it is here to the cartilages. Okay, so you see how it could get abraded during locomotion. And this section really reiterates to me how the cartilages are responsible for foot shape. Okay, so foot shape, you look at the solar aspect of the foot and look at the white line, but the white line can move. But those cartilages there really form a frame for the proximal aspect of the foot and the coronary band. Okay, so it holds it in a frame. And we can also see when we get ossification how that might change the shape of our foot, because it pushes on the cartilages and pushes all our horn growth outwards. And also when we do get a unilateral sider, we quite often get a medial tilt on pedal bone, and we get more lateral foot growth. They become more high outside, and that could be because it's aggravating our growth, our papillae and our coronary band, and that side's growing faster. So function of the lateral cartilages, well, they don't just function on their own, they function in unison with other structures, but they're a major part in the anti-concussive mechanism of the foot. And we learned this in our first couple of blocks at college. I did 25 years ago, and it's not really changed. You've got load that comes down the limb, and then it's pushing back from a ground reaction force, and that compression has got to go somewhere. It doesn't just stop in the middle, and that's pushed in a medial lateral direction out through our digital cushion and into our cartilages and into our coronary cushion and hoof wall. So they cushion the posterior third of the foot, and they play a major role in that hemodynamic system. And I think that might be why we get those warm bloods with those stilted upright feet that are solid, they don't really move, and that we get congestion of that hemodynamic system. It doesn't really move. And as I said, they provide stability and support to the hoof capsule. So deformation of the foot and the hoof wall. Again, we've got load that comes down from up above, and then we've got a ground reaction force, okay? And it goes out through the cartilages, but as it goes out through the cartilages, our foot deforms as well, okay? So I think we get sinking of the coronary bank, we can get dorsal dips, and we can get dips of the medial and lateral hoof wall, and that coronary band kind of pushes out. And over the years, I've used packing for side bone, and I've been shot down several times by people and say, why are you using packing for side bone? It's just an ailment. Just take the outside of the shoe off, it'll be fine. But we have to restore some function to that internal aspect of the foot. And what I once thought, and Hayden thought, that packing stabilizes the coronary band, so it stabilizes that coronary tissue at the top. I have to admit now, it's quite painful, that Stephen Hill is right. It doesn't do that. And I've got a little pilot study to show you. When you have compression from a frog support, that actually moves out. And now I've got a new theory, and I'm looking forward to chatting to him later about it. So, Farrier approach here. Well, attention to detail in every aspect of what we do. And something I am super guilty of, and I try and get better, and I'm going to get my apprentice to remind me and pull me up on it, is I quite often watch horses walk up after I've shod them, okay, to see how good I am and everything, and just to make sure it's sound before I drive away, to put my mind at rest. But we need to start looking at some of our more problematic horses before we shoe them. It's really, really important. Because you might not be aware of it, but lots of little bits of information will be going in on how you fit your shoe, how you grind your shoe, how you manipulate that surface, take away some of that vibrations from landing. It's really important. Attention to detail to our medial lateral and AP balance, okay? We've got to try and get that foot centralized and getting our load going up through the center of that foot instead of that ground reaction force shooting off in one direction or the other. Influence the mechanics of our foot in a positive way. Level footfall is really important. If that horse stabs its lateral toe into a surface, we've got adverse vibrations and concussion going through that limb, which is softening the landing frame. And as I'll explain, pads and packing. Now, performance inhibitors, okay? Now, horses can compete at a high level with extensive side bone and not have a problem. And I think that's something to do with the type of foot that horse has. If there's more space at the coronary band, to that side bone that might have less problems. If it's tighter, it might have more problems. But in a lot of papers, within the first couple of sentences, it says, anecdotally, there's a shortening of strides. I don't think there really is much evidence, but anecdotally, there's a shortening of strides. And I certainly get feedback from clients that horses aren't going quite as well and they feel a bit short and pottery and stuff. And I think that's probably just the side bone compressing on soft tissues. They can be very reactive to different surfaces because that foot isn't functioning in the same way. And that's even on a synthetic surface as well. It might work really well at home on a lovely, nice, consistent surface, but they take it to a show, and then there's either a deep surface or a really hard surface, and you get an irregularity in seasonal performance. And the reason for this, I think, is because during British summertime, we get a change in hoof morphology. So the sole and the frog and the white line hydrate really, really quickly, okay? I've done a research project on it. But what it also does is it dehydrates really quickly. And what it does is they go out in the dew or the horse is washed down after work. It saturates, then it goes in the stable or stands on a nice concrete yard. It dries out. We lose some of the integrity of that solar arch and it just drags everything in. Whereas in the winter, it's a bit more consistent. And then we get changes at the carnew band. So when they're clinically lame, quite often it's during the ossification process when we've got inflammation and all those calcific cells are being laid down. The side bone is interfering with surrounding structures. The side bone might be the trigger, but it might not actually be the side bone. So when they're lame and we x-ray, think, well, it's got big side bones. We need an MRI to see exactly what we're dealing with. Soft tissue displacement, increased workload. As soon as they increase the workload, we can start to get lame horses, okay? Because we've got more forces on the hoof capsule. And quite often, it's a lameness that's very low grade and a little bit inconsistent. Because when they trot around the corner, they might turn a bit more sharply and they put a bit more force there. And we have a different ground reaction force going through the foot. As I said, seasonal conditions and a change in hoof morphology. Now, I talked about this yesterday and I've actually been asked by a couple of people that missed it to put it back in. For me, locating anatomical landmarks within our foot is really important for us to shoe around, okay? We're not just shoeing a foot shape, we're not just shoeing external structures, we're shoeing internal structures as well. And I sat at breakfast with Shay and James and the Colonel, and we were talking about foot mapping, and they said they heard on the podcast, like, how does foot mapping influence the way you shoe? Well, for me, it influences the way I shoe, because although a lot of us can pinpoint where the coffin joint is, okay, it just zones us in a little bit to get our proportions right. 50-50 if needed to, in front of our coffin joint and support our medial lateral balance. And it's a really, really good learning tool for some of our younger farriers to learn about foot balance and talk about why they shoe a foot the way they do, because we have to shoe that center of rotation because it's exposed to some incredible forces. And then you get a lot of leverage on the coffin joint over in breakover moment arms, which I was talking about yesterday. So I use a really simple Mark Colwell technique that I've used for years and years and years. I think Hayden showed it to me 25 years ago. And it's really simple. You just take two straight lines from the widest point of your frog all the way down to your toe. Find your white line, make a box where it goes across in the toe. You've got your tip of P3, two diagonal lines, go across, and you've got your center of rotation. The only time that it might be a little bit inaccurate is if you've got sinking of P3 in the digit within the hoof capsule, or you've got rotation or derotation, which is why x-rays are so important as well. So we need to know how P3 sits in there. And P3 doesn't change in its location, the hoof capsule changes around it, which is really important. So it's how we can manipulate the hoof capsule in a positive way to get P3 back in a nice position. And this is just the leg that I got out the freezer. But this is for Matt, and he said that he lost a client because he didn't get 50-50 around the coffin joint. When I first started out in my career, I was doing a day a month for a vets, and they wanted 50-50 around the coffin joint, and I didn't understand it. And I was putting square toes on everything and dressing the dorsal wall. But now I realize they didn't understand it either. So when we talk about 50-50 around the coffin joint, okay, it really is an anatomical 50-50 from the tip of P3, okay, to the widest point in the frog. And what I really try to teach my apprentices is to find the widest point of the frog. It's really, really important. We don't have to trim down to it, okay? We'd only trim down to it on a laminitic that needs derotating. We just need to find a nice bit of foot balance so we get our foot in proportion, so we've got a nice strong bearing surface for our shoe. But if we want to get back to that 50-50, then we can't do it with all disciplines. All we have to do is map that out, and it's actually quite achievable. Okay, so we find our center of rotation, our tip of P3, and our widest point. And then all we have to do is shoe back to our widest point with a little bit of length. We don't have to go over the top, although feet change as well. We get different types. We get feet with elongated AP balance as well. But we just have to shoe around it. And then if what they want is they want 50-50 between point of breakover, okay, and our length, we just put a breakover on the shoe. And to get it right back, you've got to put a pretty big equilibrium toe on it, okay? But we've got to remember that our horses need their toes, okay? They need their toes for foot function. I'm telling you what horses with big side bones don't like is if we overdress our feet, because that foot sinks. So if we overdress our toe, it's a real negative as well. And I don't put breakovers on all my horses. If we were talking about it yesterday, I've probably got breakovers on about 40% of my horses. Just horses that I think need it for a pathology or a performance issue. Now, these are quite old pictures, but it's a really good one to just run through for some of the younger guys. Okay, because it's actually shod quite well. It's got a nice balanced shoe on it. The foot's just long, but we've got a real lateral toe strike where it stabs its toe, and then we've got a lateral landing phase, and it's got a big lateral side bow. Okay, but all we have to do is find our white line, move that across, and trim our foot. And just get symmetry around our coffin joint. Okay, so shoe with a little bit of length. And there's a lot of theory in our old school side bone shoe, okay? So when that foot lands, we need to soften that landing phase so we reduce vibration and concussive forces that are exposed through the limb, and we encourage it to load level. And then just put a little bit of a breakover. A lot of these feet are really high outside, okay? Higher than you think they are. So I take that outside down pretty hard. Get that foot back into balance with our long axis and try and get a nice hoof pastern angle. And when we look at our horses, this is pre and post. We haven't really done that much. We've just shod it nicely, okay? We haven't put any funky shoes on. We've just got a shoe out the van, an open heel shoe. We've addressed our foot balance, okay? And we've got that landing level. But we have to remember that when we go back, it will try and revert back. And shortening our shoeing cycle, because this horse has gone way too long, would be a really important thing to do. Now, taking that outer edge off your shoe is really important, and try and bring everything back. So when a horse has got big sharp edges on the outside, when it's trotted on a circle, it creates medial lateral torque on the coffin joint and the navicular suspensory and high up in the foot. And something like a roller shoe is really useful. So we take away those sharp edges and we can grind them off, or as I said, put a roller shoe on. And what we can do is we can take pressures off our hoof wall and try and encourage our hoof to grow down nice and uniform. Now, when we're doing this as well, okay, a little tip, if you're going to forge that outside off instead of grind it off, I quite like forging it off because it makes my outside nails a bit coarser, so I can just fire them straight up. But a little tip is straighten the branch before you start overlapping your blows and going all around your branch, because if you don't, you overlap your branch and that branch has come all the way in and almost touching your inside branch and over your center line, and it's really hard to rebalance. So just have a go at opening that outside branch as well, and by the time you've forged all that off, it will come almost back into balance and you can fit it nice and easily. So if I've got a horse with a big side bone, I try and put a flat shoe on there, create a bit of slide. They don't like grab. Try and take pins out if they've got pins as well. Bar shoe is really important, okay, so we can stabilize the back of that foot as well, okay, and change a bit of the moment arm. So on a surface, if you've got a horse that's got an open heel shoe on, that will react differently to a horse that's got a bar shoe or a packer on. It will sink deeper in the surface, it'll become a bit more derotated, and the moment arms on the coffin joint will have to work a lot harder to pull that out, so you'll get more deformation as well. And here you can see that it's really, really common to get a medial lateral balance in our horses which have got a unilateral side bone. I think that side bone probably holds that foot a bit more in a frame, so their inside sinks. So x-rays are really useful, and don't leave them high outside. I hate that. Okay, so why we use packing. So I did this animation about 13 or 14 years ago. When I did a talk, I did it on PowerPoint, and my presentation skills have come on a lot more, but I just love this one. So what this demonstrates is it's highly over exaggerated, okay? So we've got down load coming down, we've got up ground reaction force. One of the negatives of horseshoeing is everything's going to fall through the middle under compression. And I've got a video of a leg on a press to show you that later. But by putting a packer in, we keep that sole in place. So it's in, they keep that diaphragm up, whether it's a flat pad or whether it's a full pack. If we put a full pack in, we will have more of an influence on that coffin joint because it's a denser material as well. And I use packing a lot just because of that. We can change vibrations, we can hold our feet together more, and we can control our foot balance. But it also controls vibrations through the foot as well. It controls our horses worked on different substrates, which is really important. Now, I felt a little bit of an underdog when I saw Dominique's lecture yesterday, and I bought him all his drinks last night because I'm going to go home and maybe improve my press. So Dominique spent 5 years building his press to take his Metron readings. I bought one off eBay and I set it up whilst Casey made some shoes. And I think there's two different types of research in the industry, and it doesn't necessarily matter. There's laboratory research, which is what I did for my fellowship study, and there's in the field research if you just want to find something out. And I think that's really important. And in the field research, when you want to find something out, is kind of finding out what you need to improve on, isn't it, Dominic? And what you need to make better to get better results or more consistent results. But we have to do these really simple sort of studies or pilot studies to find out what we want to know. And what I did with this is I had my first idea, okay, was I had some legs dropped off and one of them had a big side bone, and I thought, I want to find out what happens at the coronary band. So I was going to do a cut through the coronary band, okay, and I was going to slow-mo video the tissue there, around there, and get my results. And I happened to mention it to my old boss Hayden, and he said, you don't want to do that, mate. What you want to do is you want to put some seamstress pins around the caudal aspect of the foot, get it x-rayed, use Metron so you've got some calibrated results as well, and then you can measure caudal displacement of the foot. Now this was on the test limb as well, okay, but you can see how much that compresses. We compress these feet to about 400 kilos, okay, slides forward a little bit on the block there, but for the actual data collection I just put a strap around the toe, okay, and that seemed to work quite well. Interesting enough, when this foot compresses, you can see where I've changed one of the pin locations, and you can see some fluid coming out of the coronary band. Okay, this demonstrates our hemodynamic system. Okay, under compression, everything's pushed up in there, and then you can see it get sucked back in. It's pretty satisfying, hey? And what that does is, under compression, it pushes everything up the limb, and when it's being unloaded, everything fills back up. It's really important. But what I did was I tested the same foot with the side bone with an open heel shoe, a flat pad with 25 dim, and a spider plate with a 25 pouring, which is what I use a lot of, okay? So, and then I got some results with the help of Mark Aitkins and his Metron data analysis. So this is unloaded, this is loaded. So if any of you are doing a research project and you're taking x-rays of loaded feet, DP x-rays, you've got to remember that that fetlock hyperextends behind the pastern, and the Metron AI system can't pick up or do accurate readings of P1 and P2 angle, okay? Because they're distorted because you've got the fetlock superimposed behind it. But what I found out with this, and I brought this into my talk yesterday, it just reiterates the benefits of packing, okay? And there's studies out there that also do this as well. But interestingly enough, with packing, we managed to maintain our height of P3, okay? There was no sinking of that at all. And we considerably increased it with a spider plate and a soft pack, which is actually a softer material, but it adheres to the sole, okay? So that sole can't slip on that. And our medial tilt, okay, was significantly influenced with a spider plate as well. It didn't tilt as much as well, so it kept everything in a frame. What we also did with our pins is we took a linear measurement, okay, from one medial pin to lateral pin, okay. We took an average from each foot, okay, and then compared them, and now I've got to tell Hilly he's right, okay, which is going to be super painful. But he is right, okay. Myself, and I had to tell Hayden, and he agrees with me now, that we thought that putting a spider plate on and packing, why we were getting good results was it was helping to stop the coronary band from deforming onto the side bone. But what it actually does is you get more displacement. It displaces median laterally and out, okay? So the open heel shoe, you get less displacement. And I think the reason for that is that what happens is when that foot loads, okay, everything's dragged down through the middle. So it's got to come back from a negative position, okay? So when we put a packer in there, everything's already in place and it can't sink. So it's got to go up and out, if that makes sense. Okay, and then I'm trying to work out why I might have got better results with a spider plate and packing. And there's lots of reasons. Number one, we can hold P3 in position, so that might influence our navicular suspensory, our collateral ligaments, our condrungular ligaments to the navicular bone as well, which we found out. And then we've read Jay's study and Andrew Cassidy's study. However, what it might actually do is it actually pushes the coronary band away from the side bone, so we actually create more space, okay? So as that foot loads, it actually moves it away from the coronary band, so we're creating more space. And also, because there's more compression, maybe we're restoring some function in our hemodynamic system, because it's not just falling through the shoe, it's compressing everything and pushing everything all the way back up into the foot. So into the limb, sorry. So my first protocol really, if I've got a horse lame and it's MRI'd, either to MRI'd or X-rayed, and it's got big side bones that extend proximal to the coronary band, or it's got navicular suspensory issues or collateral suspensory issues or coffin joint pain, on a sports horse, what I would do is I would just chuck a spider plate on it. And I'll do it every day for all of those reasons. And they're dead easy to fit, okay? All we do, mapping the foot's good because we can choose the right size spider plate, okay? It's important that we get our arms around the center of our center of rotation, okay? To try and keep it all in place. Tack it in as well. Casey, my apprentice, is now better at welding to me, and I just wanted everyone to hear that, okay? She is really, really good at welding, and I don't like to admit that to her in the van, but now I've admitted it to everyone. You are better at welding than me. Grind all that weld off, okay? Fill it up with a pack. If you can't pull that from the back, what you need to do is just put a little bit of gaffer tape around the back, punch 2 holes in your board here, hold the foot down. If someone can hold it, great, but if not, fill it up from one side. When it comes up out the other hole, put a little bit of tape on it, chuck the foot down, and way to go. And also, when you fill up a full pack as well, I always put a little bit of hoof dressing either on the center of my pack or on the sticky side of my board, so it's easy to peel off. So hoof pack is super, super adhesive, okay? So if you've got a styrofoam board there and you try and peel that off just after you stuck it on there, it comes off in a million bits and it goes all over the yard, okay? Now, this is a really, really useful shoe, okay? If you've got a horse that's really, really sore, you can do both things, okay? And I always carry some of these in the van. It's one of the only sort of prefab bar shoe things that I carry. And this has got massive side bones, okay? It's a 140 horse. And what we do is we take all that outer edge off that shoe and fill it up with hoof pack. And when I was shoeing this horse before it moved away, when you walked it up, it actually turned round corners better than any of the others. They'd walk it up, and as it goes into the turn, it just rolls around that corner. And I'm sure that takes a lot of that pressure off the coronary band and helps all the medial and lateral torque on the coffin joint. So in conclusion, it's not all about the side bone, okay? Just because it's got big side bones, It might be the trigger to why it's lame, but it might not be the cause. It could be any of those anatomical soft tissue structures around there. Soften the landing phase and reduce vibration. Really, really important. Just dead simple foot stuff. Control foot balance. Don't be afraid to put a bit of packing in it. You can control lots of things with that. Influence the coffin joint in a perfect way. And if in doubt, just chuck a bar shoe on it. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Andrew. Another great talk. We've got some questions.
What? Yeah. Right, please.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks very much for that again. You talked about the widest part of the frog, and obviously it can be a bit contentious issue.
Yeah, well, the widest part of the foot.
Widest part of the frog.
So I probably meant the widest part of the foot.
But you also talked about when you were mapping using.
Oh, sorry, yeah, the widest point of the foot of the heel. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
And are you talking ground surface, or are you talking deeper in one of the sulci?
Yeah, as deep as you can go, the true widest point of the foot. Like, one of the first things I do when I trim a foot up is I trim both that frog into a uniform shape. Okay, so it goes back into a functional structure, and I get right up into the sulci. So I've got my heel buttress and my frog, and you won't be realizing it, but that will be giving you so much information on how you're going to trim your foot. If we take our shoes off, wire brush our feet out, and probably just start trimming, we'd probably trim that foot a little bit differently. So if we find our widest part of a frog, and we actually know how long that foot is as well. And something, I shoe short as well. I've got some horses that do some fast work and stuff like that, and I do shoe short. But I think in this country, we are a little bit guilty of shoeing short because it might be tradition and also seasonal conditions and fields and everything else. But if they're going to pull a shoe off, they're probably going to pull it off anyway. I don't lose any more shoes than anyone else. And if we trim up at widest point of the frog, it will encourage us to shoe a little bit further back, I think, as well, yeah.
Cool. I've got one more, if I may. The hemodynamic on the video where you show the compression of the foot and the blood came out of the pinhole where you've moved the pin.
Yes.
Did that do the same with the two different types of packing?
Yeah, it did. Well, it did it more. So, yeah, this was really like a pilot study, but it could be something that's much bigger. And because we got the packing in there, what happens is, as I explained, you get more deformation as the results showed. So actually, when it's compressed, everything doesn't fall through the middle. So you've got more compression, which is why one of my theories might be that it restores a bit more function into that hemodynamic system. Like, shoeing horses has its negatives as well, and we've put an open heel shoe on. The first thing that happens to a lot of feet, unless it's a really strong foot, is the frog falls through the middle. And that isn't actually natural for the horse, is it? So we're taking away one of the natural functions, really, aren't we?
Anyone else?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. That was great. At what point in the pathology do you start to see a bit of hoof deformation?
Sorry, can you just...
At what point in the pathology do you often see the start of hoof deformation in the shape of the feet?
At the coronary band?
On the solar aspect of the foot, and when you see the lateral side start to get tighter in and high outside, does that correlate with a certain progression in the pathology, like with the grade?
Yeah, I think definitely. Like when you get grade 2 and 3, when you get pathology at the coronary band, you get interference in the coronary band, don't you? And I'm sure it's something to do with aggravating the horn-producing cells. Do you know what I mean? So we get faster growth on the outside as well. So that's going to grow faster, and also it pushes that coronary band out, doesn't it? Like, so if we push the corium out, it changes at the coronary band and come down. And that can be, because we don't x-ray all our horses when we shoe them, that can be one of the first signs, because we fit our shoes up every 4-6 weeks or whatever. We're really good at remembering shapes, aren't we? We don't really have to go back to the anvil twice. And you can go there and then ever so suddenly your shoe doesn't start fitting. You have to alter your shape of your shoe. And it doesn't take long to work out something's going on or something changing. A bit like a laminitic, isn't it? First thing you see is changes in the foot, really, isn't it, mate?
So if you see a horse that's abnormally grown outside, is that something that you would pick up on and maybe to get x-ray sooner?
Maybe if it's different to what's normal. and the horse isn't going as well. I'm not one of those people that goes around and sort of, there's nothing wrong with it, but pick up feet and notice something different. Oh, that's different, like, you know, or like, we'll tell the owner and do something about it, like, you know, or go for a process and something. But quite often they will give you feedback, won't they? They're really good at it. So they'll give you feedback and say, oh, there's something wrong with my horse, or it's not going very well. Like, you know, it's starting to get a little bit sticky on a term, which is a sign as well. And you can say, well, actually, the morphology of that foot is starting to change shape. So why don't we just get an X-ray and see what's going on in there? Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Spider plates. What's it do, please?
It's a good question, because I think they're not really fully understood, really. The fact that you've got a solid plate on the bottom of the shoe, okay, that makes a massive difference on a surface, okay, so it props that up on a surface. It makes a difference to the type of packing you put in as well, because when that packing pushes down, okay, and that packing can push into a surface, whereas it's got something to push against, okay, there's some theory behind it. Changes the force vector. So if you put a horse with a spider plate on a force plate, it produces what's called a force vector, okay? And that force vector, that ground reaction force, can shoot on any different direction depending how that horse is landing or how it is loading, and it centralizes that a bit, so it starts to bring all those sort of forces and vectors back in and straight back up in the limb, so it acts a little bit more normally. But yeah, I've asked other people that use a lot of them, and you know, like, I think they need a lot more research, like, you know, and it's like all these things that come in when they first come out, people start using a lot of them, okay, and then they fall by the wayside and stuff. And I think sometimes, like yesterday, I was talking about, you know, a lot of us just use dim now because it's easy and to put in, and we've always got it in our van, whereas we think we need to start revisiting some of the things that we might have tried a few years ago, and every horse needs something different. Do you know what I mean? So, but yeah, maybe that's a research project for you.
You're omnidirectional. I bought a couple of those omnidirectional spider plates.
Yeah, they're brilliant. If you've got a horse which...
You can't forge, you can't change the shape.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, you don't need to. Like, they're not designed to be forged, and they're dead easy to fit. Like, dead easy to fit. And they're really balanced, okay? So all you need to do is get one that's wide enough, okay? If you've got a slightly elongated shape and it's a little bit too bold, you just grind the sides in, okay? You must drill the holes out. That's really important. I do that on racing plates anyway. I drill the holes out in front so I can get a bit of pitch because they're not designed. But they're dead easy to fit. You don't want to forge them. They don't want to go near the anvil. So they're not designed for that. So you take them out and you just get your width. And if you've got an elongated foot, grind the sides in, you know, or they've got quite a big slope in that toe. I always back them up a bit in the toe, like, you know, but you'll be amazed at what feet they go on really, really well. Yeah, there's a really nice range of sizes as well. They've designed them well. Yeah.
On your point of revisiting things, you've mentioned a lot about old school sidebone shoes. Have you ever been asked to groove heels on feet?
Groove heels.
Were you too young?
Yeah.
Wow. Anyone else ever had to put grooves down heels on?
Oh, really, like in front of the heel buttress, like a like a laminatic.
Yeah, on the outside of the hoof wall with the heel.
Yeah, I've never heard that before.
Have you not?
No, well, it was a real like phase of it about 10-15 years ago with laminatics, wasn't it, to try and stop the shunting of the heel growth to the toe, but I've never heard of it.
It's meant to increase expansion of the
Okay. Yeah. Could do.
Right, I think we're back on time. So thank you, Andrew. Can we give him a round of applause? Thank you, Grady.